Rain came down like a curtain the evening Nia Adeyemi screamed on the roadside, one hand gripping a broken guardrail and the other clutching her swollen belly. The sky over Lekki was bruised purple, and the lagoon wind whipped plastic bags across puddles that looked like small lakes. Kiki riders slowed, unsure if they should stop. A hawker dropped a tray of oranges and ran toward Nia with a wrapper. Horns blared. A siren sounded far off and then faded again. The city moved as if it did not want to look too closely at a woman in labor with no one beside her. "Please, please," Nia said, teeth clenched, breath breaking. Her sandals were gone. Her ankles were caked in mud. Her face, young, dark, soft around the eyes even when she hurt, was tight with a pain that pressed up her spine like fire. Sweat mixed with rainwater and salt and fear. She thought of the names she had chosen, the 3 names she whispered every night, the 3 beating drums inside her belly. A motorbike skidded near her and stopped. The rider, a lean Ghanaian named Kofi with a blue rain poncho and a scar on his chin, took off his helmet and called out, "Sister, are you okay?" "Hospital. I need the hospital," Nia said. Another contraction seized her, and she bent double. Kofi jumped off the bike and shouted to the hawker, "Auntie, bring cloth. Make space." People began to gather, tentatively at first. 2 mechanics with oil-stained hands, a woman with a baby tied to her back, a traffic warden stepping off the median. Lagos could be cruel, but Lagos could also move like family when the sky fell. A black convoy turned the corner. It came through rain like a knife, 4 SUVs in formation, tinted windows high as pride. The lead car sent a wave through the flooded gutter that slapped the roadside with a loud smack. Kofi raised one hand, the universal sign to slow down. He stepped in front of Nia as if his body could be a wall. "A beg. Person day labor," he shouted. The convoy did not slow. The second SUV, sleek, new, black paint shining under the water like a cold smile, hit the edge of the deepest puddle. Water rose in a brown arc and came down over Nia. Mud splashed up her legs, over her cloth, across her face. She gasped from the shock of it, her mouth filling with grit. The hawker cried out. Kofi swore. The crowd itself drew back, a collective flinch as the world chose a side. The rear window of the second SUV hummed down 2 inches. In that small dark gap, the shape of a man's jaw, smooth and expensive. Then his voice, low, precise, the kind that had signed contracts in Atlanta boardrooms and London hotels, the kind that charmed politicians and scolded executives. "Clear the road," said Marcus Adeyemi. Nia's head lifted slowly, like the moon leaving the horizon. Rain clung to her lashes. She saw the familiar cut of his suit, the gold signet ring with the Adeyemi seal, the calm cruelty in his eyes. Her husband. The billionaire who built towers and bought water rights and smiled on magazine covers. Her husband, who had not answered her calls since morning. Her husband, who knew her due date. "Marcus," she said, breath-tearing. He did not look at her belly. He did not look at her hands. He did not look at the woman he had made vows to under a canopy of white orchids 2 years before, when the choir sang and people said, "See love." He looked ahead, past her, as if she were clutter in a hallway. "Clear the road," he repeated. The window slid back up. The SUV moved. A sheet of new water rose and fell. Nia staggered. Kofi reached to steady her. The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in rage. Someone pounded the back of the car. Someone took out a phone. The convoy slid past anyway, tires chewing water, engines calm as heartbeats. A contraction struck Nia like lightning, bright and total. She dropped to her knees. The baby was coming. Not 1, 3. She felt the first head pressing low, insistent, a promise that the body always keeps. Thunder rolled over the city. She dug her fingers into the earth and decided, in the clearest thought she had had all day, that she would not die here. Not in mud. Not forgotten. "Mama, get hot water," Kofi said to the hawker, who nodded and ran. "You," he told the traffic warden. "Stop cars. We need space." He pulled off his poncho and spread it on the ground. Sister, lie down small. Breathe. Nia lowered herself onto the plastic, the rain glass cold against her back. Her belly tightened again and again. The world narrowed to breath counting and the feel of hands around her. Women's hands, steady hands, hands that had caught babies on kitchen floors and church benches and market stalls. A grandmother with silver in her hair signed the cross over Nia's forehead and then wiped mud from her cheeks with the corner of her wrapper. You will live, the grandmother said. You will live, and they will live. Nia nodded and pushed. The first baby slipped into the world fierce and small, a girl with a mouth like a crescent moon. She wailed immediately, a clean high cry that cut through rain and traffic. The crowd cheered. The grandmother tied a clean cloth around the cord, improvised, careful. Kofi used his own shirt to rub the baby's back until her cry became a steady rhythm. The second is turning, someone said. Breach. Nia closed her eyes, swallowed fear, and pushed again. Pain carved her, but the truth that lives under pain was stronger. She felt hands guiding gently. She felt time stretch. A boy this time, arriving feet first, stubborn and calm. He did not cry at once. Panic rose like water in Nia's throat, but Kofi bent over him with a sure touch and a soft sound, patting, coaxing, begging like a brother, and then the boy coughed and opened his mouth to life. Ego be, the grandmother said. She smiled a gap-toothed smile, an old Lagos reassurance, and wrapped the boy beside his sister. The world had shifted. Even rain seemed to soften. But Nia was not done. Her body convulsed again, harder than before. She bit down on the corner of the poncho to keep from screaming. She had one breath to think of their names. Maya, Jordan, Zuri. And then there was no space for names, only work, only the ancient push that connects every mother who ever was to every mother who will be. The third baby came slow. The air around them went tight. The traffic warden held up both hands like a priest telling the world to wait. The baby slid free at last. Another girl, small, quiet, too quiet. For a heartbeat nothing moved. The hawker's eyes filled with tears. Come, my daughter, the grandmother whispered, rubbing the baby's chest. Kofi leaned in. Nia reached up with shaking hands and touched the tiny face, rain beading on those new eyelids. The girl breathed. Once, fast. Then again, stronger. She opened her mouth and cried like sunrise. Lagos exhaled. Strangers became aunties and uncles in a breath. Someone draped a shawl over Nia's shoulders. Someone else made a call. The city, which often keeps its distance, drew close and formed a ring around a mother and 3 children like a village. A white Hilux finally swerved to the curb and the driver jumped out. He wore a paramedic jacket and a worried frown. Traffic held us. This city a beg, he said, but his hands were gentle. He checked the babies, checked Nia, and nodded. They are strong. Nia looked up at the sky and laughed and cried at once. The kind of sound that happens when a soul turns a page. She thought of Marcus's voice, cold as glass. She thought of her father's proverb, the road is never stronger than the one who walks it. She held out her arms for her babies. And then the crowd's noise changed, rose, turned. A murmur went up like wind in palm fronds. Tires hissed on wet asphalt, a soft expensive sound. The black SUV had returned. It was the same vehicle, same tinted windows, same polished grille, the same expensive license plate that made traffic wardens suddenly polite. It pulled in close to the curb, ignoring the shouted warnings of the paramedic. Rain darkened its roof to a glossy coal. The back door opened and Marcus stepped out, umbrella held by a driver who avoided his eyes. Marcus wore a charcoal suit that did not know the word weather, a white shirt the color of denial, shoes that made the ground look cheap. He avoided the mud with the kind of practiced movement that meant he had avoided many things. The crowd drew tight again. Phones came up like flowers. Kofi stood, shoulders squared. The grandmother rose too, her chin lifted. The paramedic said quietly, "We should move to the truck," but Nia did not move. She sat there with her children in her arms and looked at her husband as if there was no rain between them. "What do you want?" Kofi asked, voice steady. Marcus did not look at Kofi. He looked at Nia finally, but not at her eyes. At the babies, at the triplet miracle he had been told would be impossible, at the life that had happened without his permission. For a second his learned calm cracked. He swallowed and reset his jaw. "I came to make something clear," he said. The driver lifted the umbrella higher. It made a small tent of dryness over Marcus's anger. "Make what clear?" the grandmother asked, and her voice carried like a bell. "This spectacle," Marcus said, flicking 2 fingers toward the babies as if shooing a fly, "must not be misunderstood by anyone. These children." He stopped, choosing a word the way he chose a property to acquire. The crowd leaned closer. Rain ticked on the umbrella like small stones. "Are not mine." The words landed with the weight of a stone dropped down a well. For a second, even the rain sounded shocked. Nia's face did not move, but her eyes did. They cleared, they sharpened, they steadied on him. The paramedic's mouth opened and then closed. Kofi took 1 step forward, and the driver beside Marcus half raised a hand in warning, thin and useless. "Say it again," the grandmother said, as if the second saying would reveal a lie hiding behind the first. "They are not mine," Marcus said more loudly. His gaze lifted to the phones. "Record it. Let everyone record it. The Adeyemi name is not a broom to sweep dirt. I will not be extorted by a woman who—" He did not finish, because the grandmother laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had seen harm come dressed as truth many times. She pointed a wet finger at the baby boy swaddled in Kofi's shirt. "If they are not yours," she said, "then God is now signing with your family's ring." "What nonsense is this?" Marcus said. The grandmother reached for the boy's tiny left hand. She lifted it gently in the rain, and those closest could see it. A pale mark on the boy's palm, the shape of a small crescent, and a birthmark that had been told and retold in the Adeyemi family like a fairy tale. An old servant once said the first male child in every 3rd generation was born with it. Newspapers wrote about it in soft features. A biography mentioned it in passing, calling it a charming rumor. Marcus wore it on his ring, crescent and dot. A ripple went through the crowd. Phones moved closer. The paramedic blinked and then, against his training, leaned nearer too. "Coincidence," Marcus said. The word shook, only a little, but enough for Nia to hear. The paramedic cleared his throat. "We should get the mother to the hospital." "We will," Nia said, her voice low but steady. She kissed the boy's forehead and then met Marcus's eyes. Rain slid down her cheekbone and fell from her chin like the second hand of a clock. "Move aside." He didn't. Pride pinned his feet to the ground. He looked at the babies again, all 3 of them, and then at Nia's face, which no longer asked for anything from him. There was a flicker of the man she had married, the one who used to bring her Accra at midnight and quote Maya Angelou in a bad American accent to make her laugh. The flicker died as quick as it came. "You will receive papers," he said, his tone a door closing. "My lawyers will." He stopped again, because something else had entered the scene. A white Lexus had pulled up quietly behind the SUV. The person who got out did not carry an umbrella. She was tall, mid-40s, with locks pulled into a low bun and a navy trench coat that soaked dark as she walked. Even in rain, she moved with the careful choreography of someone who owned rooms simply by entering them. Some people recognized her at once, and their whispers folded into the sound of the weather. "Is that from Atlanta?" "Brooks. Ms. Brooks." Chantel Brooks, American venture capitalist, co-founder of a fund with a name that sounded like a mountain, and the largest outside investor in Adeyemi Global, stepped through the mud and stopped a few feet from Marcus. She took in the scene, the woman on the ground, the 3 swaddled newborns, the crowd, the ring, the rain. "Marcus," she said quietly, without greeting. "What are you doing?" He turned, startled. "Chantel, this is not the place." No, she said. But it is the moment. She looked at Nia, and her face changed. The business moved out of it, and something kinder moved in. Mrs. Adeyemi, she said, voice softening at the name. Are you okay? I am, Nia replied. She did not add, I am, because strangers were my family when my husband was not. Chantal nodded once, then to the paramedic. What do you need? Transport now, he said. She's lost blood. The babies are stable, but we can't be here arguing. I'll drive, Chantal said. She turned back to Marcus. Get out of the way. You have no idea, he began. Actually, she said, cutting him off, I have 3 ideas. She held up her fingers, counting. 1. Your PR people will never fix this if you keep talking. 2. I was on a call this afternoon when someone from your office mentioned a private DNA test, and I didn't like the smell of it. 3. If you try to stop this mother from getting to a hospital, I will call the same press who write your praises and tell them a different story. Rain made faint drumming on the cars. The crowd's breath seemed to pause. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then stepped back half a foot. Not a full foot, pride would not let him, but enough for the paramedic to help lift Nia toward the Hilux. Kofi gathered 2 of the babies, and the grandmother took the third like a relic being carried from a temple. Chantal shrugged off her trench coat and put it around Nia's shoulders, soaking her own blouse without a glance. As they moved, someone shouted from the edge of the crowd, that voice all foam and fear. Police! 2 patrol cars slid into the mess of vehicles, lights spinning red and blue through the rain. Doors opened. Officers stepped out, hands on belts, faces tight with the kind of duty that doesn't like questions. The leading officer, a tall man with a neat beard, walked straight toward the small procession, glancing once at Marcus, once at Chantal, and then fixing on Nia. Mrs. Adeyemi, he asked. Yes, she said, standing with help, still holding the third baby close. I'm sorry, the officer said, and for a brief second sympathy flickered in his eyes. We received a report. We need you to come with us for questioning. There is an allegation of attempted fraud concerning paternity and... The officer hesitated, as if even he could taste the ugliness of the words. The crowd erupted again, angrier, tighter, closer. Someone shouted that hell would not carry this news. Someone else told the officer to use his head. Kofi's jaw worked as if he held a stone between his molars. The grandmother's back straightened like a beam. Officer, Chantal said calmly, stepping into his line of sight. You will not arrest a woman who just gave birth on the roadside. You will escort us to the hospital. You will do it now. This is a legal matter, he replied, scanning the faces, measuring the influence. His gaze landed on Marcus, then drifted back to Chantal, the one who did not blink. It will be a human matter first, she said. Then legal. And if you are worried about paperwork, worry more about cameras. He looked around, 10, 20, 30 phones recording. He swallowed. We can escort, he said finally, tone formal. But she must come after for questions. Nia's legs trembled. She had nothing left for anger. There was only the raw need to move, to feed, to sleep. She tilted toward the Hilux, and the paramedic steadied her. Chantal helped with the step. Kofi held the door. The grandmother climbed in too, fearless as a general. The babies mewed like kittens at the edge of rain. Wait, Marcus said, voice sharp. He had not moved far. His shoes were wet now, a small defeat he would likely punish someone else for later. You cannot take them anywhere without my consent. Those children will live, the grandmother said simply. And, Chantal added, her face now cool as a marble table, they will have lawyers. Good ones. Ones who do not confuse fear with truth. Marcus's driver started to reach for his arm, then stopped. The officer waved at his colleagues and they pulled their cars into position in front of the Hilux, lights turning the rainy air into a carnival of red and blue. The paramedic closed the back door. The engine coughed, then settled into a hum. The crowd parted slowly, unwilling to break the circle, yet moved by the ancient pull of an ambulance leaving with new life inside. "Go," Chantel told the driver. He put the truck in gear. Nia looked out the window one last time. Her gaze fell on Marcus. He had everything: money, power, respect. But in that instant he looked small, like a boy whose toy had been taken by a bigger truth. She wanted to feel pity. She found only a clean, steady emptiness where his love used to live. The Hilux began to pull away. A splash of deeper water shook the chassis. The babies squeaked and then settled. The grandmother clicked her tongue the way old women do when they push worry aside. Kofi jogged beside the truck for a few steps and then slapped the side affectionately. "You will be fine," he said through the window, and managed a grin that looked like hope. And then, slicing through rain and noise, came the scream of brakes. Everyone turned. The black SUV had lurched forward, wheels spinning in the mud, and slewed across the narrow lane. It stopped half a meter from the Hilux's fender, blocking the path. The driver's hands were white on the wheel. Marcus stood outside again, umbrella thrown aside now, rain making his hair lie flat against his head. His eyes were wild in a way Nia had never seen. "Stop that truck," he shouted, voice ripped up by something ugly and frantic. "You are not taking those children anywhere." Chantel stepped between him and the Hilux, palm up, calm as a doorframe. "Move your car, Marcus," she said. "You will not win this." But Marcus was not looking at Chantel anymore. He was looking at the window of the Hilux, at the tiny gap where rain had smeared the glass, and at what he thought he saw within. His voice dropped to a harsh whisper that still carried. "I know what you did, Nia," he said. "I know who helped you." The officer's hand moved toward his radio. Rain seemed to hold its breath. The Hilux engine revved softly, waiting for a clear path. Nia felt a cold knife of fear slide under her ribs. She turned toward the grandmother, then to the babies, then back to the man outside who once brought her Acura at midnight. The things people do when they are afraid can change a life in 1 minute. She knew that now. Marcus reached into his suit and pulled out a folded paper, plastic wrapped against the rain. He held it up like a verdict. "I have proof," he said, eyes burning. "And if you move that truck 1 inch, I swear." The sentence never landed, because from behind the SUV, tires hissed and a new car door opened. A familiar voice, older, steadier, full of a Lagos that remembers its stories, came across the rain. "Marcus," the voice said, "put that paper down." Every head turned as a woman stepped into view, her gelly tall as pride, her wrapper rich blue and tied with a precision that said she came from a line of queens. The rings on her fingers caught what light there was. Even the officer straightened, reflex respect moving through him like a current. It was Nia Adeyemi. She looked at her son once, then past him to the Hilux, and the expression on her face was not anger. It was something heavier, like sorrow with a backbone. "Put it down," she repeated, and then she added the words that cracked the rain-soaked evening wide open. "Because that paper is a lie I paid to create, and I have come to confess." For a heartbeat the rain forgot how to fall. The officer's radio crackled and then went mute under the weight of a mother's truth. Nia Adeyemi's Gelly held the storm at arm's length. Her eyes, sharp, black, old with memory, stayed on her son. "I said," she repeated, each word deliberate, "I paid for that paper. I thought I was protecting our name. I was wrong." The driver's umbrella sagged. The crowd leaned in as if pulled by a rope. Even the paramedic, halfway into the Hilux, paused with his hand on the handle. Marcus's jaw locked. He once learned to conquer rooms by never blinking. Now his eyelids fluttered. "Mother," he said, voice pitched low. "Not here." "Here," she answered, turning slightly so her words reached the phones and the faces and the police. "Because here is where I helped shame a woman in labor. Here is where I watched my son become smaller than the power he worships." Marcus took a step, then another, rainwater lapping at his expensive shoes. "You will not embarrass me in front of investors, board members, and..." Investors. Mama's mouth folded around the word like it tasted bitter. She spared one glance at Chantel, who did not flinch. You see only the ledger. I see the house we built before there was a ledger. I see the vow you made in a church you now treat like a lobby. I see a newborn boy with your grandfather's mark and 2 daughters carrying your name even if you refuse to carry theirs. The officer cleared his throat and gestured vaguely toward the street, as if to say, move this to anywhere but my jurisdiction. But there was no other place. The city had decided the road was a courtroom and rain the ceiling. Explain, Marcus said, knuckles white around the plastic sleeve. Mama looked past him to Nia in the Hilux. It started long before today. Back when Lego skies ran hard and harmattan dust sat on windowsills like a quiet guest, the Adeyemi compound hummed with the soothing arrogance of wealth. Gardeners in green caps, drivers in crisp white, a cook whose jollof smelled like childhood. Marcus moved through it all with ease, a tall man who wore responsibility like a tailored jacket. He had returned from Atlanta with a new swagger in his walk and a wife at his side. Nia, with gentle eyes and stubborn kindness that could lift a room. She had met him at a fundraiser where silver forks clicked against china and hopefuls spoke about water projects in Osun State. He was the keynote that night, Nigeria's son who turned pipelines into philanthropy. She was there with a friend from nursing school, still in her hospital clogs, laughing at how the auctioneer said, priceless, like it had a price. He spotted her at the back, the one person not posting on her phone. Later he said that quiet drew him, like a harbor. They didn't talk money that first week. They talked food, her mother's okra soup, his father's disdain for stew without goat, and books, her tattered copy of Baldwin, his love for Angelou's, and Still I Rise, which he queued up in his worst American accent just to watch her roll her eyes. Inside the space where their laughter met, something decided it could live. They married beneath white orchids, the choir pushing heaven down to earth with, "Great is thy faithfulness." His mother had pressed gold against Nia's wrists and said, "Welcome, daughter." The cameras loved it. Magazines called it modern Nigerian royalty. But even as the photographer captured Nia's smile, a shadow took its place, expectation, thick as humidity. The Adeyemi line was printed on business contracts and etched into the side of a glass tower on Victoria Island. It also flowed in whispers at family gatherings. Who will carry the name? Who will carry the land? For months they tried gently, then seriously, then desperately. Lagos traffic taught patience, but empty cribs taught something sharper. Doctors with soft voices said, low probability is not no probability. The word IVF floated like a life raft neither of them felt brave enough to climb on in public. Privacy, Marcus said, and hired a driver for a clinic visit in a different city, paper masks hiding faces that billboards knew too well. Nia counted injections and counted blessings. She prayed with American church podcasts and Nigerian aunties who said, drink zobo with ginger. She ate pawpaw at sunrise and walked slow in the evenings around the compound, greeting gardeners by name, asking the gateman about his son's WAEC results as if he were her kin. In the 9th month, when Rain started rehearsing for the coming downpour, the ultrasound tech's eyebrows lifted. 3, she whispered, like a secret God himself told. The room went quiet until Marcus laughed, one hand over his mouth like he had just been caught doing something joyfully irresponsible. He kissed Nia's forehead again and again. 3, he said into her skin. 3. News like that doesn't stay seated. It stands up and dances through houses, over fences, into boardrooms. The Adeyemi elders shook their heads at the audacity of triplets. Some called it blessing. Some called it dangerous. Most called it both. At dinner one evening, the family filled the long table. A portrait of the first Adeyemi patriarch, stern, mustached, wearing the pride of a cocoa trader, hung over the sideboard. Marcus poured sparkling water into crystal and listened with polite half-smiles as uncles discussed the exchange rate and cousins compared destination schools. Mama watched Nia the way she watched accounts, closely, with love that sometimes disguised itself as fear. Nia's belly rested against the table's edge, and her hand moved there without thinking, fingers tapping a rhythm that matched the small kicks within. An aunt with a scarf tied too tight said what others had not yet said aloud. Triplets. A sign, eh? But these modern clinics. One cannot be too careful. These American ways. Silence set down its plate. A cousin coughed. Someone tried to crack a joke about there being enough babies for each side of the family to claim. It fell to the floor without sound. Mama lifted her hand gently. This is our daughter, she said, gaze easing across to Nia. She will not be questioned like a suspect at her own table. Nia's relief slid across her face like light. She did not see the second conversation happening in her mother-in-law's head. It was a private meeting between fear and pride, a negotiation that would become a plan. Later, in Mama's sitting room with the big radio that still searched for old high-life stations on Saturday mornings, the elders worried around a proverb. When a river runs too full, it begins to eat its own banks. They spoke names of enemies who might use the triplets to force a change in the family trust. They whispered about a clause in the old man's will. The first son of the third generation to bear the mark becomes legal custodian of ancestral land and the voting tiebreaker in the family company. And if there is no son, an uncle had once asked, half as a challenge, half as a test. Then the eldest child, the patriarch answered back then, surprising everyone. But traditions have a way of taking the original law and dressing it in new clothes. People remembered the son part and forgot the rest. Or pretended to forget. So Mama feared. Not of babies. Of loss. She remembered being 19 with a baby on her hip and a husband dreaming empire that would swallow all their hours. She remembered making akara at midnight when the first factory opened and men worked strange shifts. She remembered the day her husband came home and stared without speaking at the newspaper headline that said a rival had taken their shipping contract. She remembered kneeling in church whispering deals with God that sounded like love and sounded like survival. She had learned that in Lagos, if you did not hold your name tight, the wind would pull it from your hand. Fear sold itself to her as wisdom. Quietly, convincingly, at a discount she could not afford. When rumors started, thin at first, then fat with tongues, about Nia's American ways, about medical enhancements, about a doctor in Surulere who could make twins for clients who feared age, Mama did not shut them down quickly enough. She let them walk around the family's compound in borrowed shoes. Let it blow past, one aunt advised. Truth is a stone in a river. The water will learn its shape. But Mama remembered a different proverb. If you do not tell your story, others will tell it for you, and they will make you the villain. So she decided to tell a story first. She sent a driver, hers, not Marcus's, to a lab in Ikoyi where the receptionist wore nails like small knives. She paid for discretion. She signed with a name not her own. She ordered a test. Private, quiet, quick. She told herself a truth that was not true. I will test to remove doubt. She did not admit the second truth. I will test until I find doubt. The lab returned a result. Inconclusive. She went to a second lab, then a third. When a fourth man asked whom she wished the truth to favor, fear finished its sail. She paid for a lie that she told herself was a bridge. I will cross this today and pull it down tomorrow, she thought. But bridges, once built, invite footsteps. Lies invite more lies to dinner. She hid the paper in her bedroom safe behind a row of family Bibles. She told herself she would never need it unless somebody tried to hurt them first. Life rarely asks for permission. It just knocks and enters. Work got louder. Adeyemi Global had taken on a highway concession outside Port Harcourt and a desalination plant that newspapers called ambitious, with a smile that meant reckless. Marcus flew to Atlanta twice in 1 week to close a deal and keep a board member calm. Photographers caught him by the wing of his jet, where he practiced a face that said both, I am powerful, and I am tired. In the quiet between flights he looked at his wife's face on his phone and understood love as ache. But leaked memos are like oil in water. You smell them before you see them. Someone within the company, perhaps afraid of the triplets' political weight on the family vote, whispered to the wrong reporter that Adeyemi Global faced a cash squeeze. Investors like Chantel knew the rumor from the tremor it left in markets. She placed calm calls. She told the board, the math works if management stops confusing expansion with appetite. She also asked, curious but cautious, why a private lab bill with Mama's handwriting had crossed her desk via an insurance auditor who didn't know which Adeyemi was which. When Nia called Marcus that morning, the morning her water broke, he didn't answer because he stood in a glass room with men who measured worth in quarterly reports, not contractions. We'll announce the water project next week, he was saying when his second phone, the private one, buzzed on silent. He saw Mama's name 10 minutes later and texted, "Is Nia okay?" She answered with a sentence so small it took a moment to find the sin inside it. "There is a problem with paternity. Come home." By the time he slammed the boardroom door, the world outside had turned to rain. Somewhere between the elevator and the curb, anger put on his jacket. He called Nia's number, got the soft machine voice that says leave your message, and filled the space with questions that sounded like accusations. He told the driver to step on it. The city shrugged and offered more traffic. On the road to Lekki, Marcus's convoy caught sight of a crowd moving like a tide around a point in the rain. He saw plastic poncho blue and a woman on the ground. He saw mud. He saw phones. He did not see a wife. He saw a headline, a billionaire, a birth, a betrayal, and he saw stock tickers bleeding his name. Pride pulled the wheel. Disbelief pressed the gas. When water rose and fell off his car, it baptized his fear in the sight of everyone. He told himself he would return, once he had warned the cameras, once he had set order. He went 10 blocks before shame that disguised itself as strategy circled back and put him at the curb again, half a meter from the ambulance fender and a lifetime from the boy with the crescent and dot birthmark. That was the road. This now was the room without walls. "Officer," Mama said, stepping closer to the man with the neat beard, drawing her wrapper tighter as if wrapping her resolve. "The report you received about fraud? I made the call. I said words I did not fully believe. I let fear drive. Withdraw it." The officer's eyes widened a fraction. Procedure and conscience wrestled behind his pupils. "Madam, an allegation was filed. We can accompany to hospital and then. You will also call your superior," Mama said softly, but in a tone steel recognizes. "You will say a family dispute reached your desk dressed as crime. You will say a mother who should have known better now knows better." He hesitated, then lowered his radio. "We will escort to the hospital," he repeated, more firmly. "And after statements, truthful ones." His gaze slid to Marcus and then back to Mama. Protocols tend to bend where courage stands. Chantel, who had watched power betray and redeem itself in 100 rooms, took a single step forward. "Nia needs to move now," she said to the paramedic, who snapped back into motion as if someone had pressed play on him. Kofi handed one swaddled baby to the grandmother, then jogged ahead to clear a swath through bumpers and raincoats. The crowd parted with reverence. Something like joy flickered between the wet faces. Joy not at another's embarrassment but at truth managing to push its head above water. Marcus stood helpless in the middle of his own narrative, soaked in something that wasn't rain alone. He looked down at the plastic sleeve and realized how light it was for something that had dragged him so far from himself. "Mother," he started. No title could make her change her mind now. She had found the small, unbreakable place inside her where women stand when a house is burning. "Later," she said, and there was no anger left in it, only tired love. "You can be angry later. You can apologize later. You can learn later. Today we move." The Hilux's engine caught and held. The grandmother climbed in. Chantel shut the door with a clean final sound that told the night it could not take these children. The officer lifted his hand and his colleagues rolled their cars ahead, lights casting the rain in red and blue veins. The paramedic shifted into gear. A white sedan slid to the curb at that exact moment, brakes whispering. A young man in a damp suit stepped out, clutching a stiff brown envelope like a talisman. He looked around for a particular face, found Marcus, and beelined toward him. "Sir," he said, breathless. "From Justice Okoro's chambers." Emergency injunction. He extended the envelope. It had the trappings Lagos respects: a crest, a blue ribbon, a stamp with ink not yet dry. The young man's eyes flicked to the hylix, then back like he knew he was holding fire in paper clothes. Marcus did not reach for it at first. He stared at the seal the way a drowning man stares at a log. Salvation, or trap? "What is this?" he asked, though he already feared he knew. "An order," the man said, shifting from foot to foot. "Temporary custody to preserve status quo pending paternity determination. It compels immediate transfer of minors to." The rest of the sentence shredded in the wind of the crowd's disbelief. The officer took a step toward the paper, duty pricking his spine. Chantel's face went still in that corporate way that means no is sitting in a chair with its arms folded. Mama's hand lifted, not to strike or to snatch, just to ask the sky for patience. The paramedic looked from the injunction to the babies to the officer to the rain-slicked road ahead. "Don't you move that truck," the young man added quickly, half to himself, as if reciting instructions given at a desk far away. "The order says the children must be placed under the care of their legal father until—" "Legal father," the grandmother repeated, her laugh lighter but sharper than before. "God has already stamped the boy. The law is chasing after what heaven has finished." Marcus caught the envelope then, fingers clumsy. He turned it over, then back, then slid a thumb beneath the flap. Inside lay the careful violence of legal language. He read enough to feel his stomach tighten. He had not asked for this. Not exactly. But someone had moved fast on his behalf, someone who knew which judge owed which favors, someone who understood that in Lagos, paper builds roads that cars must follow. He lifted his head. "They can't leave," he said, volume low but undeniably directed at the officer now, not the crowd. He held the injunction up like a stop sign. "You have to enforce this." The officer's jaw ticked. Training told him one thing. Conscience told him another. The rain said hurry. The babies said live. Chantel stepped closer, words measured as if she were on a call with 5 attorneys and a hostile CEO. "Officer, the order references paternity preservation," she said. "We are in the middle of a medical emergency. There is a doctrine for this. Health first. If you enforce now and harm occurs, your name goes in the bad column forever." The young man in the damp suit shook his head. "Ma'am, the judge will also have to answer questions," Chantel said, eyes not leaving the officer's face, "about why he issued an order at 7:43 p.m. on a public holiday without hearing from the mother or her counsel." She glanced at the stamp. "Today is a public holiday." It wasn't, not officially. But the court's night office often behaved as if the rain itself were a holiday. The officer exhaled, a long breath full of the weight of his uniform. He put 2 fingers to his radio and said to no one in particular, "Control, stand by." "Son," Mama said to Marcus, voice suddenly soft enough that only those closest heard. "Who did this for you?" He didn't answer. Maybe he didn't know. Perhaps a cousin with ambition. Perhaps a bored ally who thought companies belonged in courtrooms, not nurseries. Perhaps a lawyer who loved billable hours more than ethics. He felt the old instinct to grab the first tool that made him feel in charge. He felt, also, the small echo of the boy he once was, who brought Akira at midnight. The Hilux idled. The babies rustled, 3 small bodies in a world too loud. Kofi stood with his feet planted like a tree in rainy soil, eyes flicking to the side street. He had lived long enough in this city to know when a story was about to attract the wrong kind of audience. Because down that narrow lane, a second set of blue lights began to swing, and the shape of an unmarked black van crept forward, slow as a decision you will regret later. 2 men in plain clothes sat in the front, caps low, faces blank. They didn't wear the look of public police. They wore the posture of private orders. The young courier with the envelope followed Kofi's stare, then swallowed. "I was told others were coming," he muttered, voice barely above rain. "Private child welfare. To receive the infants." "Private what?" the grandmother snapped. Officer, Chantal said, tone now made of ice. If you allow men with no clear authority to touch those babies, you will create a scandal that will not melt in 100 rainy seasons. The officer's spine straightened by an inch. He turned, raised his hand, and barked to his colleagues. Their posture changed. Guns did not leave holsters, but hands moved closer. The van rolled nearer, tires making that whisper on wet asphalt that Lagos residents know too well. A door slid open halfway. A man in a navy windbreaker leaned out, flashing something that caught light quickly and hid it just as quick. We have papers, he called, as if papers end all thought. So do we, Mama answered, and held up both of her hands, empty, a gesture that was older than any new law. They are called truth and repentance. Marcus looked between his mother, the officer, the approaching van, and the babies visible through the Hilux's wet window. Something in his face softened like it might break. He had a chance, right there, to choose the smaller word, wait, or the larger word, stop. He opened his mouth. Before any word could land, a second car, quiet, sensible, gray, pulled in behind the black van. A woman stepped out, shaking rain from her coat. She held a slim folder and moved like she had learned to read law in rooms where people forgot to be kind. A clerk from the family court, younger than she felt, with eyes that carried other mothers' stories. I'm looking for Mrs. Nia Adeyemi, she said, scanning faces. And for Mr. Adeyemi. Her voice didn't carry the swagger of injunctions or the slick assurance of private agents. It carried something else, procedure's steady cousin. The crowd gave her space without being asked. I have a counter-order, she said, holding the folder up like a lantern. Filed by counsel on behalf of Mrs. Adeyemi at 7:58 p.m. It prioritizes emergency care and prohibits removal of the infants from their mother pending a full hearing tomorrow morning. Counsel, Marcus echoed, as if the word had developed legs and walked behind his back. Who filed it? Chantal asked, already knowing the answer from the way the woman's gaze slid toward the side street where a slim, bespectacled man now hurried, shoes splashing, suit jacket open, a tie flapping like a flag of messy courage. Nnamdi Okeke, the clerk said. Duty counsel for the Family Rights Project. Kofi grinned despite himself. I know that name, he said. The lawyer that fought that estate case when the uncles wanted to push the widow out. Nnamdi reached them soaked and smiling in that breathless way of men who have been on the phone with 3 judges at once. He nodded at the officer, at Chantal, at the grandmother, and then at Nia through the window, his eyes softening. Ma'am, he said. You're not alone. The officer took the counter-order, read fast, then slower. He lifted his chin toward his colleagues. Block the black van, he said. Escort the Hilux. We move now. The men from the van protested in sharp, ugly syllables. The officer's colleagues formed a human punctuation mark that ended their sentence. The young man with the injunction took a small step back, as if distance could make paper less heavy. Marcus held both orders, one in each hand, his arms like scales. Choose, Mama said, not unkindly. He looked at the tiny crescent on the baby boy's palm again. He remembered his grandfather's hand, brown, veined, strong, guiding his small fingers over a map of a cocoa farm. He remembered the taste of akara and midnight laughter. He remembered who he had been before the boardroom taught him to exchange softness for applause. Go, he said hoarsely to the paramedic. Take them. The Hilux jerked forward, found space as the officers' cars carved a corridor through the crowd, and rolled toward the hospital with wipers beating a fast, steady metronome. The grandmother's profile, chin high, eyes forward, hung in the rear window like a promise. The black van tried to inch ahead. The officers did not let it. Rain found its rhythm again. The young man with the injunction stood useless with his envelope under his arm, a messenger who had delivered fire to a house already learning how to build with water. Chantal exhaled and turned to Marcus. Tomorrow, she said, we talk. Tonight you go home. Not to the tower. To your house. Wash your face. Sit in the nursery. Think about which man you want to be in the morning. He looked at her the way men look at friends who say hard things they didn't know they wanted to hear. He nodded once. The nod shook. Mama touched his cheek with the same palm she had raised to bless him at his naming ceremony. You forgot who you are, she said. But forgetting is not the same as never knowing. He swallowed, then placed the injunction back into its sleeve, and for the first time since the rain began, he let his shoulders sag. Namdi tucked the counterorder into his case. I'll meet them at St. Catherine's, he said to Chantal, then to the officer. Thank you. The officer gave a curt nod, the kind men give when they are relieved to have chosen correctly. Kofi watched the Hilux's taillights become two red prayers in the grey distance. He rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled. Be like film, he said to no one, and everybody. Phones went down. Umbrellas opened. The street began to remember it was a street. Then a horn sounded from the far end, long and insistent. A messenger on a scooter, poncho flapping, wove through traffic and skidded to a stop beside Marcus. He lifted his visor, eyes wide with the distinct panic of corporate emergencies. Sir, he panted. News just broke, US outlet. Big one. They say Adeyemi Global falsified desalination figures. SEC questions. Stocks tumbling, Atlanta pre-market. He shoved a damp phone toward Chantal. The headline was a slap of cold metal. Her jaw set. She looked at Marcus and saw a different storm gathering, one that threatened to use tonight's shame as kindling. The messenger added, voice cracking. They also named your family situation. Sir, they have photos. Rain battered the road harder, as if the sky had decided to beat a drum no one could ignore. Somewhere in the thin distance, the Hilux turned left toward the bridge and the hospital. And behind them, where the crowd had been, a figure stepped out from the shadow of a kiosk. A slim woman in a yellow raincoat, hood up, watching with a stillness that didn't belong to the curious. She raised her phone slowly, not to record but to check a message. Light from the screen lit her face for a second, familiar to some who knew the company rumor mill well. It was the executive assistant who had handled Marcus's schedule for 2 years. The same assistant whose cousin worked in the lab in Ikoyi. The same assistant whose name would later appear in a spreadsheet beside media consultant, anonymous. She tucked the phone into her pocket and walked calmly toward a car with plates from Ogun State. Her lips pressed together like someone who had just confirmed step 3 in a plan with 5 steps. The Hilux disappeared into rain. And at the curb, as the officer's radio chirped with new orders and the black van backed away, Mama's phone began to ring. The name on the screen made her hand tremble, not because of power or politics, but because of memory. An old friend from church with a voice like a bell. She answered and listened. Her face stilled. When she hung up, she looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen a different past than the one he thought he owned. Your father's lawyer, she said quietly. He kept copies of things we were not meant to see. He says I must come now. He says the mark on your son's hand means more than we knew. What do you mean? Marcus asked, fatigue loosening his vowels. Mama closed her umbrella, letting rain touch her face. He says the original will we all quoted, she whispered, is not the last one your father signed. A bus roared past, spraying a wave that made everyone jump back. In the wash and noise, the meaning still landed with a thud none of them could dodge. If that is true, Chantal said, calculating in seconds what it had taken other lawyers months to try to read, then those babies aren't just heirs to a name. Mama nodded once, eyes on the road where the Hilux had gone. They might already control the company. St. Catherine's smelled like antiseptic and rain. Fluorescent lights trembled a little under the pressure of the storm. Nurses moved with that quick, careful rhythm that says crisis lives here but hope does too. The paramedic rolled Nia in as the grandmother held one sleeping girl and Kofi held the boy. Tiny fist curled around the edge of the shirt he was swaddled in. The second girl lay against Nia's chest, eyes fluttering like a bird learning how to breathe. 3 preterm, but strong, the paramedic reported. Mother delivered roadside. Moderate blood loss. The receiving doctor was a small woman with a fierce bun and a voice that could carry across a stadium. Her name tag read, Dr. Ajay, neonatal. She didn't waste a second. NICU team, 2 isolates now. Heat lamps. Check sugars, sats, temp. Keep mama with 1 baby for bonding. Move the others with me. They worked like a choir. Kofi watched as the boy, Jordan, Nia had whispered, was lifted into a clear plastic crib under warm light. The smallest girl, Zuri, went next, mouth searching the air, determined and tender. The last, Maya, stayed on Nia's chest, a warm weight that anchored her to the earth. "Sir," a nurse told Kofi gently, "we need you to stand back." Kofi nodded, but his eyes stayed sharp. He stood where he could see everything. Lagos had taught him the difference between safety and the idea of safety. Namdi, dripping from the rain, signed temporary admission papers like an uncle by birthright. The officer who had escorted them took a position by the double doors and told his men to hold the corridor. "Nobody in without a badge," he said, and added for the record, "and without my eyes on them." Chantal arrived a few minutes later, trench coat abandoned to the storm, phone pressed to her ear. She listened more than she spoke, and when she hung up she went straight to the quiet corner where Nia lay. "They are trying to drag you into a public war," she said softly, not wanting to add weight to a woman already carrying the world. "Don't worry. For tonight, you are not a headline. You are a mother. We will handle the rest." Nia looked up, tired to the bone yet steady. "Thank you," she said simply. Chantal nodded. "Can I call anyone for you?" "My sister," Nia said after a breath. "In Atlanta." She gave the number. Chantal took it like a promise. Down the hall, a small TV chattered muted news. Word scroll crawled across the bottom. Questions about figures, unnamed sources, discrepancies, investigation, and somewhere, a blurred image of a woman on a roadside cradling 3 lives while Rain wrote a story the world wanted to own. A nurse clicked the TV off. "Not here," she murmured. Across town, the old lawyer's office kept its own weather. Thick carpets, leather chairs that sighed when you sat, a framed picture of the first Adeyemi patriarch shaking hands with a governor whose smile looked borrowed. Files leaned in neat rows like men in line for communion. The name on the frosted glass door read, OKON and CO. Solicitors. Mama and Marcus stepped in soaked, a strange pair, power and repentance walking side by side. Elder Okon stood to greet them. He was thin, with silver hair that refused to sit down and eyes that remembered dates like other men remember songs. "I was waiting," he said, voice soft but edged with urgency. "Sit." They sat. He opened a safe with 2 keys and a code and took out a flat envelope so old the glue had yellowed. He set it down like an altar bread. "Your father brought this to me 2 months before he died," he said. "He said we should keep it sealed unless the crescent and dot birthmark returned in the 3rd generation, or unless your house forgot who it was." Marcus flinched. Mama folded her hands over her wrapper to keep them from shaking. Okon broke the seal and slid out papers with the careful respect Lagos reserves for documents that can change a life. "Your father wrote a codicil to his will," he said. "After a scandal in his youth that you all chose not to remember, he decided the family name was too fragile to be controlled by whispers." He looked up at Marcus. He made the mark a sign. Not superstition. A key. He read, "In the event that a male child of the 3rd generation is born bearing the familial mark of crescent and upon his palm, trusteeship for the family land and chairmanship tie-breaking authority in the company shall be held in trust by the child's mother until the child reaches 21, provided the mother has not been lawfully stripped of parental rights." The room was quiet long enough to hear rain find the window panes. "In plain speech," Okon said, sliding the paper across, "your father gave power to whoever brings the mark into the world. He had his reasons. He saw what greed did to brothers. He believed mothers start with protection, not ambition." Mama closed her eyes. Her whisper was barely a sound. "He never told me. He feared what telling would do," Okon said. He feared what not telling would do too. A man with power dies with many fears. He tapped the signature. But he did not fear ink. Marcus read the lines twice, lips moving. He thought of his board of projects with names like Blue Bay and Greenwater, of men who praised him and men who waited for him to slip. He imagined walking into the morning's meeting to say, "My wife holds the tiebreaker now." The thought was a knife and a bomb. Ocone reached back into the envelope and pulled out a smaller sealed packet. "There is also this," he said. "Personal." He wrote, "For my son, if he forgets the taste of Akara at midnight." Marcus swallowed. The paper crinkled under his fingers like dry leaves. "Open it later," Mama said, not unkindly. "Open it when your hands aren't shaking." Ocone continued. "There is one more piece. Your father placed a clause that if any person within the family initiates an action that publicly questions the paternity of a child later shown to carry the mark, that person's voting rights are suspended for a term of 1 year." Mama's face went still. She did not defend herself. She took the blow as a woman takes rain, straight on, because there is no point pretending the sky is dry. "I will tell the board myself," she said, voice level. "They must hear the confession from me." Ocone nodded. "Better you than the street." Marcus got to his feet like the chair had burned him. "We have to get this filed, corporate affairs, court registry, trustee notice, tonight." Ocone had already called his clerk. "We are drafting," he said. "But listen," he leaned forward, old eyes bright. "There will be a move. Men who only know how to fight with paper will throw more paper at you. Protect the mother. Protect the babies. Everything else can be argued tomorrow." Back at St. Catherine's, the NICU hummed with machine lullabies. Soft beeps, warm air, the whir of tiny lives learning the rhythm of the world. Nia lay propped in a narrow bed, a nurse helping her drink sweet tea in small sips. The grandmother stood at the foot like a sentinel, whispering psalms under her breath. "He makes the barren woman abide in the house as a joyful mother of children," she murmured, not to boast, but to remind fear its rent was overdue. Kofi drifted between the doorway and the glass, eyes landing again and again on Jordan's palm where the faint crescent drew itself like a soft moon. He didn't understand company law. He understood marks and mercy. Namdi returned with a file and a smile that tried to sound like calm. "We've filed the counter-order with the hospital," he said. "No one moves the babies without Nia's signed consent. The police unit commander agrees. I spoke to him myself." The officer at the door lifted a thumb without taking his eyes off the corridor. "Where is Marcus?" the grandmother asked, tone neutral but layered with old knowledge. "Lawyer's office," Namdi said. "He's learning." Nia nodded once, focusing on the next breath, the next swallow, the weight of Maya against her chest. There would be time later to think about will clauses and boardrooms. For now, she counted her daughter's fingers and her son's breaths. Chantel stepped away to a window box, called Atlanta, and left a message that was part friend, part field commander. "It's Chantel. She's safe. Babies are here, strong. Call me when you wake." She hung up and faced Namdi. "They've framed the desal numbers like a crime," she said softly. "But it's sloppiness. Pride. Not fraud. We can fix sloppiness. We can't fix foolishness in public if we keep giving them fresher stories." Namdi rubbed his forehead. "We stop the bleeding tonight. Tomorrow we cut out the infection." "Agreed," she said. Just then, a nurse with box braids and laugh lines peeked in. "Sir." She meant the officer. "Security says 2 men downstairs claim they're from social welfare. No names on the list." The officer's face shifted into the shape of no. "Keep them at reception. I'm on my way." He looked at Namdi. "You come." They left together, boots squeaking on the waxed floor. Kofi stretched his neck, trying to look casual, then followed at a distance. He didn't trust uniforms without names. The lift dinged open to the ground floor. The reception's blue plastic chairs held a few sleepy relatives. A cleaning lady swabbed water from the entry mat. By the glass doors stood two men in navy windbreakers, caps low, holding clipboards like shields. One flashed something too fast to read. "We're here for the infants," he said. "Court order." "Show me your ID and the order," the officer replied, voice calm, stance not. The man held up the same paper the scooter courier had tried to deliver earlier. Namdi glanced and shook his head. "Superseded," he said. "Filed after. Invalid for removal without notice. Step aside." The man's jaw hardened. His partner looked past them toward the lift as if he could will it to open and swallow him up to the NICU without permission. Kofi noticed the detail that didn't belong, a set of keys on a hospital lanyard dangling from the second man's hand. He looked at the plastic fob. It wasn't hospital issue. Wrong font. Wrong color. He had a driver's eye. Details were his bread. He took a slow step closer. "Where did you get those?" he asked, tone friendly like an old bus park trick. The man flicked eyes at him. "Staff entrance keys," he said, too quickly. The officer reached out. "Hand them over." The man hesitated a hair too long. The officer took them anyway. "Security," he called. Two guards jogged over, young and eager. "Yes, sir." "Escort these men outside," the officer ordered. "Hold them. Verify with the ministry. If they make any move for the back entrance, arrest for trespass." The men argued, voices rising. But the guards were country boys with good backs. They ushered them through the doors like goats back into a pen. The night swallowed them into rain. Kofi watched the parking lot as lights from a low gray car blinked once, then twice, like a signal. His chest tightened. An Ogun plate glinted under a street lamp. He had seen that plate near the roadside crowd. He turned to the officer. "I've seen that car before," he said, pointing. "At Lekki. Someone watched us." The officer's gaze followed his finger, then sharpened. "Security, lock the back. Now." They moved. The receptionist, wide-eyed, crossed herself in a way that would make her mother laugh. "No film," she whispered to no one. Upstairs, unaware of the slow dance at the door, Nia drifted on the edge of sleep. The grandmother hummed an old tune the way elders hum when babies need anchors. Chantel typed a message to her PR team but didn't send it. She deleted it and wrote something kinder. From the corner of the nursery, a nurse in teal scrubs and a disposable cap rolled a clear cot toward the bathroom. On the cot, Zuri slept, face small and stern like an ancestor checking on her descendants. The nurse's gait was smooth. She wore hospital shoes. Her ID badge swung convincing plastic. She paused as if to check the warmer's plug, then adjusted the cot's blanket and turned toward the corridor. Kofi stepped out of the lift and saw her by chance. He almost smiled, another nurse doing nurse work, when something set his teeth on edge. It wasn't her face. He couldn't see it clearly under the cap. It wasn't her badge. Lots of staff had badges. It was the smell. He had spent an hour under rain and diesel. Hospital corridors smell the same: alcohol, bleach, baby powder, but there was a faint trace around her like the inside of a new car. Silicone. Clean leather. He had lived in transport long enough to know the scent of a showroom quiet SUV. "Excuse me, nurse," he said lightly. "The NICU is that way." She didn't look up. "Yes," she said. Her accent was Lagos, but the consonants clicked too tight. She pivoted smoothly toward the back stairwell instead of the main NICU doors. Kofi's skin prickled. He glanced toward the officer's empty post. He took 2 slow steps, then faster. "Auntie," he called, letting his voice carry just enough to make a few heads turn. "Why you day go service stairs?" She pushed the cot faster. The grandmother looked up at the sound and felt the air change. She pressed Maya closer to Nia and moved like storm clouds becoming rain. "Where are you taking that child?" she asked, voice low enough to call angels. The woman in scrubs didn't answer. She reached the stairwell and put her shoulder into the bar. The door gave. Kofi broke into a run. So did two nurses who had been chatting at the station. "Hey!" one shouted. "Where are you?" The woman shoved the cot through the gap and disappeared onto the landing. The clear plastic wheels rattled over the metal threshold. Zuri startled, mouth opening without sound. An alarm began to bleat, not the high frantic one, but the steady scolding of a door used wrong. A guard's radio snapped. Footsteps pounded from the lift. The officer burst from the end of the corridor. His eyes found Kofi, the open stairwell door, and the trail of tiny drops where warm air met rain-cooled glass. "Lock the ward," a nurse cried. "Call code Amber." Lights changed from soft to urgent. The NICU doors hissed shut like a held breath. Chantel reached for her phone and then for the emergency pull cord. Nia tried to sit up, pain flaring like a lit match. "My baby," she said, the words breaking in the middle. The grandmother didn't scream. She picked up a stainless steel tray from a side table with one hand and lifted her wrapper with the other and ran faster than women her age are supposed to run. A blue flash down the corridor. Kofi hit the stairwell and took the steps two at a time, the sound of the cot wheels echoing below. He reached the first landing in time to see the woman in teal push through the next door toward a service corridor that ran to the back of the hospital. Rain roared louder there, and that new car scent was stronger, blowing in from outside. "Stop!" the officer shouted behind him, radio already calling the back unit. "Block the rear exit." Down the narrow hall, the woman glanced back once. The disposable cap shifted. For a second Kofi saw a profile he almost recognized. The cheekbone, the tight jaw, the quick, careful eyes of someone who lived 2 steps ahead of trouble. The executive assistant? It was impossible, but Lagos made impossible things look like everyday food. She hit the crash bar and the door flew open to the loading bay. Rain smashed in. A gray car idled 10 meters out, trunk already popped. Ogun plate. Kofi lunged. His hand caught the cot side. The wheel jerked. The cot wobbled, then slammed into the doorframe. Zuri wailed, air finally finding her small chest. The woman twisted, stronger than she looked. For a heartbeat Kofi thought she would fight him. Instead she let go of the cot and sprinted for the car, heels flashing under the hem of her scrub pants. The driver's door opened from the inside. She dove in. The car lurched. Kofi pulled the cart back into the corridor with both hands as 2 hospital guards barreled through the door, soaking in rain like sponges. The officer appeared a beat later and slammed the bar to keep the door wide, body between danger and the child. The gray car fishtailed, tires screaming on wet concrete. It shot forward and vanished into the dark, taillights a pair of red eyes that refused to look back. "Plate," the officer barked. A guard yelled the numbers into his radio. Somewhere in the building a phone began to ring and didn't stop. Kofi held the cot like a lifeboat. He looked down at Zuri, face pink, mouth angry, alive. He laughed, pure and unsteady. "No vex, small madam," he whispered. "Your Uncle Day here." They pushed the cart back up the corridor while nurses flanked like wings. The grandmother met them halfway, breath short, tray forgotten somewhere behind. She put both hands on the clear plastic and bowed her head for a second, just 1 second, to thank the guard who had let strength borrow her feet. Upstairs, Nia kept her eyes on the door until Zuri's face appeared again, haloed by light. She let the breath she'd been holding go. Tears slid, but her jaw stayed set. Chantel looked at the officer. "This is not random," she said. "Someone is using the chaos to steal a story, or a child, or both." The officer nodded once, anger and duty knitting themselves into something useful. "We lock this place down," he said. "Nobody in, nobody out." Namdi exhaled a curse that sounded like a prayer. "I'll call the judge," he said. "Tonight. Now." Down the hall, Kofi turned to the grandmother and spoke low. "Mama," he said. "I saw her face. I think I know who she works for." They both looked toward the elevator where a water droplet, knocked loose by a quick body in teal, fell slow through the white light and hit the floor with a sound too small for what it meant. The elevator doors opened again with a soft chime. And Marcus stepped out, hair damp, shirt collar open, eyes raw with a night that had used him hard, holding the flat envelope from his father's lawyer like a fragile thing. Behind him, Mama came with her head high. They didn't take 3 steps before a nurse, cheeks flushed, eyes wide, stopped them with words that flipped the room's air. "Sir," she said, "we have to move the boy. His oxygen just dropped." The alarm shrieked through St. Catherine's like the cry of something ancient and angry. The red light above the NICU flashed in rhythm with every heartbeat inside that room. Nurses ran. Monitors blinked. And in the middle of it all, tiny, fragile and fighting, was baby Jordan. His small chest rose and fell unevenly, the oxygen levels dipping into danger. Dr. Ajayi barked orders. "Bag him. Increase flow rate. Call respiratory." A nurse rushed in with a fresh oxygen mask. Another adjusted the tubes feeding into the incubator. The grandmother stood frozen at the door, one hand clutching her chest. Nia tried to sit up, ignoring her 4-line. "My baby. Please, my son." "Stay still, ma'am," Dr. Ajayi said without looking up. "He's a fighter. But we need quiet." The officer gently held Nia's shoulder. "He's in good hands," he said softly. Marcus stood behind the glass, face pale, hands trembling against the windowpane. For the first time in years, money, pride and reputation meant absolutely nothing. The boy in the incubator was the truth he could not buy, the only thing that could judge him. His mind flashed back to that roadside, the mud, the rain, the mark on the baby's palm, and something inside him broke open. He whispered to himself, "Don't let him die. Please, God. Don't let my pride kill my son." Beside him, Nia Adeyemi wept quietly, her strength finally giving way. "This is our punishment," she said through tears. "I asked the world to protect our name and forgot who gave us the name in the first place." Dr. Ajayi pressed her stethoscope to the baby's chest. For a moment that stretched into forever, everyone held their breath. Then, there it was, a faint, steady rhythm. "He's stabilizing," she said. "Keep the oxygen steady." The tension broke like dawn through darkness. Nurses exhaled. The grandmother fell to her knees whispering, "Thank you, Jesus." Marcus stepped back, his face wet with something that wasn't rain anymore. He turned to Nia, who was clutching the edge of her bed, eyes on their son. He took 2 slow steps toward her. "I was wrong," he said simply. His voice cracked like a dry branch. "I was wrong about everything." Nia looked up at him. For a long second, she said nothing. Then quietly she replied, "You didn't just doubt me, Marcus. You doubted God." He nodded. "I know." There was no drama left in him, just honesty stripped to the bone. "The will, the mark, it's all real," he said. "My father wrote that the mother of the child with the mark holds the family trust. That means you, Nia. You and the children. You're not just my wife. You're the rightful heir to everything I tried to take away." The grandmother gasped. "Ah. The same mark that cursed pride and blessed humility. It has spoken again." Nia Adeyemi wiped her eyes and came forward. "Daughter," she said, voice trembling, "I wronged you deeply. I let fear speak louder than love. Forgive me." Nia's lips quivered. She reached out, and the old woman took her hand. "Let's not let bitterness raise these children," Nia whispered. "Let forgiveness do it." Dr. Ajayi stepped out of the NICU. "He's stable now," she said. "You can see him soon. He's strong." They all are. Relief swept through the room like a fresh wind after a long storm. Chantel leaned against the wall, her phone buzzing with messages from the press and investors. She looked at Marcus. "You know this story's out now," she said. "But maybe that's not bad. People love redemption more than perfection. If you tell the truth, the world might just forgive you." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll tell everything. No lawyers. No PR lines. Just the truth. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The first streak of morning light crept through the hospital windows. Later that day, reporters gathered at the gates of Adeyemi Global Headquarters. Cameras clicked as Marcus stepped to the podium, not in a suit, but in a plain shirt, no tie, no armor. Mama stood beside him, eyes proud and tired. Nia was at the hospital, recovering with the triplets. Marcus began, voice steady. I failed my family because I thought power came from wealth. But today, power came from a woman I left on a rainy road and the God who forgave me through her. The children you saw on that roadside are my children. My legacy. And from this day forward, the Adeyemi family will be led by truth, not ego. The crowd murmured. Flashbulbs popped. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled one last time, and faded. At St. Catherine's, Nia held her babies in her arms. Jordan slept peacefully between his sisters. The grandmother hummed softly. Kofi stood by the window, smiling, phone in hand. He turned to Nia. Madam, the world is talking. They say, the billionaire who found his soul. Nia chuckled softly. Let them talk. I just want peace. Mama Adeyemi entered quietly, holding a small parcel, her husband's old ring. Your father-in-law left this, she said. He wrote that it should go to whoever reminds our house that love is the only true inheritance. She slipped it into Nia's hand. Nia smiled through tears. Then it belongs to these children, she said, looking down at the triplets. Because they brought us back to love. The camera panned out as the sunlight filled the room, warm and golden, washing over Nia, the grandmother, and the three babies nestled in her arms. Moral of the story. When pride blinds a heart, love must open the eyes. Power built on lies will always crumble, but truth, no matter how painful, rebuilds stronger.